Next, we have Yevgeny. Yevgeny is our VP Growth. He is from our San Francisco office, and he's one of the best experts in our industry in everything related to user acquisition, fraud, attribution, and everything in these areas. And he's going to give you a few interesting insights and very actionable things around all of these topics. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Hi guys. I'm very happy to talk about such an easy topic at 5:20 a.m. LA time, and 9:20 p.m. Tokyo time. Um, Welcome to my ex-hometown, Tel Aviv. I moved to San Francisco 4.5 years ago, and actually, what we're going to be talking about today is kind of what is really happening around fraud. How is this happening? And we'll make it as insightful for you guys and as actionable as possible. My role within the company as VP Growth is basically to understand what do we need to give you guys to help you grow as fast as possible in terms of product, methodologies, knowledge. And in the last 2 years, we realized that fraud is probably one of the biggest things that is slowing us down, all of us. Let me just turn on the timer so Nadav won't kill me. Cool. Yeah, okay, so yeah, we need more than 45 minutes to talk about it, more like another Gamefest or Fraud Fest. If you want to stay for next week, we can do that. What we're going to be covering is some terminology and a comparison around marketing channels. I called it Marketing Channels 101, but the reason it's here is because we realized that there is some gap in how each marketing team perceives each channel in terms of even terminology and how ads are served, what is really happening there. We're going to talk about incrementality, which is very close to fraud. We're going to see a few examples of how fraud is really crowdsourced to billions of users, including us in this room as end users, opening an app, seeing a banner, seeing a video. How can you really manipulate that and claim that one of us here actually did install an app? Ad monetization, something that is usually not talked about, and the impact on it by understanding fraud. This is something very important to all of you in the room. All the guys that really integrated SDKs, showing ads, serving ads, they have users leaving the app for a sec, downloading an app, and what is really happening there, and are they really getting paid? How trusted partners manipulate you guys by manipulating attribution, by taking more credit than they deserve. The last two items are the most actionable ones, which is common traps and misconceptions from usually what are you hearing from networks that you're buying from, and obviously actions and what you take next. So for Marketing Channels 101, I think this part is very important to kind of set the ground for this presentation. If you guys are the advertising entity, you're working with many different type of channels, and always think about where are the ads shown. Can I trust these guys? What is really happening with attribution? What is really happening with that campaign that I set up in the platform over email, Skype, API, whatever that is? And the easiest one to understand would be Facebook, Snap. You're really buying directly on a specific app. So Facebook, this is excluding Fan. So basically, it's a huge app, obviously, built the advertising platform on top of it. So you really know what you're doing here in terms of transparency and whether or not this source is trustworthy. Ad networks, basically, this is an entity that the technology is integrated within apps, like such as yourselves. These guys usually will provide you with the transparency. These guys have the relationship with these entities. Their technology is integrated there. There's legal contracts in place. There's due diligence in place of who are these guys, how are they integrating the technology, and what is really happening there. But it is one layer deeper. If you're thinking about DSPs, and some people, some marketing teams confuse DSPs with agencies, with affiliate networks. Some of that is usually in the mix. And something that is very important to understand in the difference between a DSP and an ad network would be their relationship with the publisher. So the relationship that DSPs have in terms of technology and the personal relationship and the legal relationship is with the exchanges. The exchanges, basically, they're not transparent to you. Usually when you buy on a DSP, you do not know which exchange or through what exchange was that ad served. And these exchanges are basically managing all the monetization side, and their goal is to monetize as best as possible. So basically, whatever data that they decide to pass to the DSP has to rely on it. So there's a trust potential here, and these exchanges can be running on many websites, many apps, can be running on the same apps as an ad network does, and this is something that is relatively easy to understand, the difference between ad networks and DSPs. Affiliate networks, which is something that is completely different in terms of the technology and the ad serving process itself. Usually, in terms of numbers, these channels are by far the biggest in terms of count. I counted over 3,000. And this is probably most of the guys that are reaching out to you, email, LinkedIn, Facebook, Tinder, whatever it is. And one of the biggest things that you need to understand when working with these type of channels is that one is ads are not really served by them, and two is that they're all affiliates of each other. So if you work with 5 affiliates, or 2 in this case, and if you start working with C will no longer have the relationship with you, but they will still be driving the same traffic they drove yesterday through network B. Right? So they become an affiliate, a subsite of network B. So this is something that is very important to understand in terms of when you think about fighting fraud, blacklisting channels. You need to understand the relationship between the channels. If you blacklist network C and you tell B do not work with C, it doesn't really matter, because the real aspect of how those campaigns are being redirected and rebrokered into the system, so C can move to somewhere like here and keep driving everything that they were driving earlier. Cool. Kind of a table that summarizes things, and I think that if we go row by row, it's very important to understand the ad serving capabilities, their relationship with where the ads are shown, the reliability of attribution, the risk of those channels, the transparency, and how can you trust it, and whether or not these channels are incremental. So the own and operate are pretty clear. The attribution aspects are unknown, but you can safely say that these channels are low risk, if at all. The only question that stays is how attribution is working. The ad networks, FAN, GDN, Unity, Vungle, for example, their relationships are very strong with their publishers. So in terms of legal, technical, personal, they know who they're talking to, and you're one layer further from that. Attribution reliability is relatively high. The reason this is here, we're going to be talking about this later under attribution manipulation. But the risk is relatively low because it's much easier to find fraud. Transparency, you can trust in case they do share transparency. Some of the networks decide not to. Obviously, the bigger ones, FAN and GDN, you cannot even get a breakdown of the sources of traffic, and incrementality is relatively strong. DSPs, which you mentioned earlier, I picked these 2 guys. You can call them DSPs, you can call them programmatic networks. But at the end of the day, this part is usually the unknown part. That there's no relationship whatsoever. There's no onboarding process of who's that publisher, how can I really validate that the ad is shown there. There's none. The only relationship is with the exchange. Because of that reason, the reliability and attribution is much lower. The risk is higher, and transparency is unknown. I'm going to show a few examples. And usually these channels also drive a lot of traffic through lower incrementality ad products. So think about the difference in incrementality between a banner and a playable ad. What kind of users are you driving through from that type of ad, just because of the ad engagement? Affiliate networks, a lot of these guys, and this is the biggest part that is important and usually people don't understand. No relationship with the real publisher, but I mean publisher is the end entity that allegedly are serving the ads, and that's usually also how the numbers and metrics look like. The mixed ones are also very important. So Some of these guys operate as ad networks and also as DSPs. And one day you can come and see that your campaign has changed. You don't really understand what happened. The reason would be that, hey, they turned on programmatic. 2 days ago, they were only running within their own SDK network, or they turned on their affiliate networks. This completely changes everything. That's why it's kind of all mixed, because it depends, and it's kind of personal to each and one of you, how that really behaves in your metrics. But that's something that is very important. Usually these guys do not communicate that as well. It's usually those things stay communicated in a different way, and only if you ask them and you dig deeper, you understand that, okay, this is great, but I don't want any part of that. Any questions about this? Cool.
Where's the place of ironSource?
Here. Today it's here. Cool. Great question. Thank you. Incrementality. In these few slides, I'm not going to be talking about how to measure incrementality. That's also another incrementality fest. It's only answering the question of, is that channel incremental or not? Those are basically the two groups, and there's the mixed ones, those that operate two types of channels. And when you think about it from your perspective, very high level, when you start engaging with user acquisition, you expect your overall installs to go up. That means that that channel is incremental. It is driving new users that probably I couldn't have reached earlier. This is a very simplified graph of that. It doesn't take into account many things, but that's what you expect in terms of your overall installs to go up. If you add another channel, you expect overall installs to keep going up. What is something that happens pretty oftenly is that this thing happens. In that case, the answer obviously is that channel is not incremental, right? Your overall installs did not go up. Usually, in today's world, if you turn on a channel like this, usually what most marketing teams do, the UA manager that really works with that channel, they focus on that channel, they monitor all the metrics, the capping, the budgets, the goals of the campaign, the ROAS, the quality at the end of the day. And these channels today, they will be driving probably your best traffic. And the reason is this, okay? And in many teams that I met, those numbers in that stacked approach is not really looked at, which means you will miss that specific point where you turn on a great channel in terms of quality, even though some things look weird, but your overall installs did not go up. What actually happens is that your overall installs start to go down, which means that if you turn on a non-incremental channel, the reality is that your overall installs will start going down. This is kind of where we picked up this issue. Us being in the orange channels, we saw something very weird happening within the campaigns. And this is real data for just one campaign, targeting only one platform, only one country. This is a six-figure a day advertiser that one day their campaign started dying off in our platform without any changes made to the targeting bids, the creative, the app itself, the attribution. Nothing broke, nothing changed. Us as a network, we stopped serving ads of that campaign, which means that that advertiser lost incrementality, even though no one touched anything. So that's kind of us and our perspective on this issue. And this is where we started digging deeper, and in order to try and understand what is really happening there. I'm going to show you how it's done. I'm going to show you two examples that are massive at scale, and you can meet it in your campaigns today, or maybe in a couple of weeks when someone approaches you with a free test, and you say you just might as well test it. This is kind of attribution one-on-one, and think about a real user, real device, not a bot, not a farm, can be any of us. The journey and the timeline of events is that we have someone that is playing a legitimate game, a great game. They see an ad. The network that served that ad will report a view-through URL to the attribution platforms. The user decides to click to download. This is where we, or whoever served that ad will report to the attribution platform. And the download starts, and then the app is open. That's where the attribution happens. Everything is fine. The advertiser pays the network pays the publisher. Everything is fine. As part of the research, we ended up with looking at what is really happening on those devices, and if something is really as big that is happening, because usually when you talk about fraud, people say, yeah, it's big of a problem in terms of billions of dollars, but for me, it's only 5% of a problem. So this is a snapshot of top apps in the last 3 years in terms of downloads. At least one of these guys is doing something that I'm going to show soon. And today we have a list of over 60,000 apps that are doing things that are manipulating attribution and basically driving fraud on real user devices. You can see the numbers are here. Average 1 billion downloads. So think about 60,000 apps. The average would have 50,000, 100,000 apps downloads. The biggest ones, top 100, have over 100 million downloads. Top 10 have over 500 million downloads. So this problem is big. This example will be on Android, and basically what you're gonna see in the video that I'm gonna show in 25 seconds is it's the same flow for the end user. The end user is playing a game. The only problem here is that somewhere and somehow he downloaded one of the adware apps. And again, there's 60,000 of these. Most of them are big. So their coverage is huge. So they downloaded that app for whatever reason. This can be photo editor. This can be antivirus. Whatever the app is. At the end of the day, these are apps that drive value to users. There's a reason why these guys have hundreds of millions of downloads, because it's technically great apps. So we have a user that plays a game, watches an ad, a VTA is reported, a click is reported, that user decides to download an app. So far, talking about the same flow, everything is the same. The only difference is that on Android, every time an app is being downloaded, all the apps on the phone can be notified about that. And that's something that is very, very important to understand, which today there is no good solution for that. And the scale is massive. So this guy in this example, basically in the same second is notified, hey, this app is being downloaded. And if this app has access to that campaign, if they report a click in this point, like they do, which you're going to see soon, once the attribution happens, the dollars go to the other way. Okay? Think about the impact of this on your ad monetization. You guys invested so much in integrating ads into your games as features. Everything is optimized. If one of your biggest advertisers tomorrow starts buying from these kind of channels, your eCPMs are going to drop. Your ad revenues are going to drop. This is big. Any questions before the video? Okay, so what you're seeing here is this is a real device, a real user that is playing a game. That just finished watching another ad. So this is basically the traffic driver within that game. If you watch a video, you get a boost for 30 more minutes, whatever that is. On the left side, you'll see all the communication, basically all the URLs that are fired from that device, the click URLs, the ad requests, if there's an SDK inside. And what we have here is a legitimate app that integrated technology. Everything is great. An ad is going to be served. And the flow, like I explained earlier, is completely fine at this stage. There's a view reported. There's a click that is going to be reported in 3 seconds. Here we go. So now, so far, everything was great. What you're going to see soon is that once that user hits the install button, this screen is going to look at the scroll bar. Once that user hits the install button, nothing much should happen besides the download of the app. Once the download starts, look at the scroll bar. Look at its size and how it goes crazy. There's like hundreds of different redirects here that end up in the tracking link. It's coming up soon. Here it is. So there's a tracking link here. Basically, once that user opens the app, the attribution cycle will decide that this was last click. Okay, pretty simple. Credit here will go to the wrong way. Instead of that publisher, instead of the network, that's going to go to a different channel. This means that the CPM of this campaign will start going down. We're going to be showing less and less ads for this advertiser, and the eCPM of the publisher will start to go down. Cool. So in the example previously, basically we saw a completely legitimate flow of a real user engaging with an ad on an Android device. They clicked on it, everything was fine. They downloaded it, and that's where something broke. How can you really tell today, though, if an ad was really served? In the next example, which is actually an iOS example, we're going to see a different perspective on this. This is actually an organic user that didn't click on an ad. No ads was served, and I want you to look at what is really happening here, because the intent here is different, right? So the previous video, the intent was clear. The download started. That's the strongest intent possible. But what if on iOS I can't really tell when a user downloads another app, and I don't have that capability? There's still a lot of stuff to do, and this makes it not that smaller than Android. So what you're going to see here on the right is a completely legitimate app. It's a dating app. Very high DUs. They're monetizing with different ad products. You're going to see a banner in the bottom, a banner placement, and everything you're going to see on the left is basically standard stuff for ad requests that are going to the exchange. Hey, please show a banner, please show a banner. And once a DSP wins that bid, that winning DSP is going to serve a tag. And that tag is supposed to load a banner. And it will load a completely generic banner of actually even a campaign that they don't have access to. So it would look like a legitimate banner. Everything will be completely seamless to the end user. And look at what happens on the left side once that banner is loaded. So far, it's still trying to call for an ad. And here we go. So this ad, they didn't even invest in like cleaning up the Google Play icon there. So this is a completely generic ad. Everything you see on the left, and I'm going to show you the gist of it in the next slide. But there's hundreds of click URLs that are fired from a real device. So I assume all of you guys have engaged with banners in the last couple of weeks. So I promise you that your device ID has been reported to click on hundreds of devices, on hundreds of apps, okay, hundreds of campaigns. So all of us are part of it, and the magnitude obviously is pretty crazy. You can see all the different attribution companies. No one really clicked on anything, obviously. You can see Kochava, Tune, Just, AppsLar, Singular, and so far for the bad news. So if I filter that list on the left to only the attribution, the real click URLs, this is a single device, okay, that drove all those clicks to many different campaigns within a time span of like 2 hours. So every time there's a bulk of like 5, 10, 20 click URLs, every line is a different campaign usually, even though in some cases they're trying to refresh that attribution window. And this is a single device. Again, I can promise you that probably your device IDs are there as well for these guys. And we think about it from the fraudster perspective. The question here is that, okay, people today found great solutions to fight with bots and farms. How can I really drive high quality users, which means real users? How can I really reach them in game attribution? So what I really need is be connected to a programmatic source. If I build a DSP or buy a subscription to a white label DSP, I get a seat on an exchange. The bigger the exchange is, the bigger my scale is, the bigger my reach is. So if I can reach 1.5 billion device IDs a day, I can figure out a good way to use that data to manipulate attribution if I have access to 200 campaigns. So the scale is massive. All they need to do is serve that tag that include basically any campaign URL that they have. Some of these guys even optimize the type of ads that they click on. For example, if you do this experiment in Vegas, it will be for gambling apps, for local rideshare apps, things like that. If you go to New York, it's going to be different. It's going to be HBO. It's going to be streaming sources. Can be anything. And they do try to optimize this in order to kind of reduce the click volumes that these channels are driving. And obviously, like you've seen in the video, the intent is not related whatsoever to ads. And at the end of the day, if this specific user downloads one of these apps, they're going to be last click, right? So these guys are actually even smarter because they know that the chances that this specific device will download one of these apps is small. So they remove the device IDs when they pass them to the attribution platforms in order to basically allow that click URL to survive and capture users through fingerprinting. So if I'm a user in New York, all of this is fired from my device without my device ID, so anyone in the vicinity with a similar device will actually be attributed to these clicks that were fired from my device. This is fingerprinting at its finest. Cool. One of the biggest tools for channels to kind of get you hooked stronger is that they will share transparency. They will tell you, hey, here's full transparency to where you're buying. We're going to pass site names, publisher names, whatever they can. And in that previous example, I want to show you something that two of those lines in that screenshot were actually on the same campaign. And you can see that these two URLs are actually coming from two site IDs, right? Even though it's actually the same site ID, so that now if you want to do some fraud analysis on that site level, you're going to have less data if they report it from 5 or 10 instead of 1. And what's crazy here is that the names that they pass are of great apps. I promise you that your app names are being passed by fraudsters as if the advertiser really bought those users from you. You can see this app and Solitaire. These were not the apps that served the ad in that video. It's very important. So it's very important to understand from this part that transparency needs to be trusted to a certain extent, and definitely depending on the type of channel that does not really have the technology to serve ads, it's a big problem. I just discussed transparency. The easiest way for these guys to get access to your campaign is if today your campaigns are being rebrokered anywhere. That's kind of the simplified version of this. If your campaigns, any of them targeting any of the countries is being rebrokered today, I can promise you channels and what is rebrokering or not, and what is really the capability of that channel that I'm buying from. Even though earlier they said that they're a DSP and they have AI and they have whatever, actually what is happening is that they do not have any technology to serve those ads, and they take your click URL, they give it to someone else and tell him, hey, let me know when a user clicked. Okay, that's kind of what is happening. It's very hard today, and it's what's one of the biggest problems in the industry, no matter where you buy, to understand whether or not the ad was shown or clicked. We rely on the attribution platforms, but it's still a problem that was not solved in the market. And everything you saw in these videos, again, it's not bots, farms. It was a real user, great quality. ROAS can be great. Think about the media cost for these parties. They don't you can drop the bid to whatever you want. That click is going to be fired no matter what. And this is something that also people tend to forget, that people try to associate fraud to Android, but actually it's much bigger on iOS these days, depending kind of how you operate your campaigns, but it can be huge on iOS as well. Basically, around a year and a half ago, we developed a pretty simple deterministic capability to try and understand, because of this problem that we witnessed, can we tell if an advertiser that is working with ironSource, can we tell if they're buying fraud or not, and what kind of fraud? We cannot block specific installs because we don't have access to that flow, but we can answer that question to us and to yourself. You are buying fraud on this app in this country, and this is what you should do. And the way we do that is basically based on how the data flows to us from the attribution platform. So today, if you're running a UA campaign with ironSource, we get all the postbacks that say, hey, this specific install is attributed to ironSource. We also get all the rest of the installs. We get all the rest of the installs for the purpose of suppression, which means that if 90% of your installs are coming from elsewhere or most of them are organic, we want to know about that, so we will not serve an ad to a user that has installed the app in the past in order to optimize your CPMs. If this is off, your scale is going to be significantly lower because we're going to be wasting impressions on users that cannot convert. So what we actually developed is a tool that is using that data set and tries to understand what is the difference between everything that we were attributed to actually all the users that we served an ad to, we reported a view, they clicked through, and we also know that they downloaded within less than 1 hour. And by understanding how big this part is and setting the right benchmarks, we basically today can easily answer that question, am I buying fraud or not? And this became more of a service to our partners, and this is kind of how we started sharing all this research content. This was shared with pretty much everyone in the industry, but this is still something important to understand how that works, and we used basically that calculation to analyze a simple contribution perspective. This is what we got credited for, and this is what we think we should have get credit for. And the numbers in some cases can reach 50%, right? So we serve ads, we get paid only for 50%. Because someone else is getting paid for those 50%. Those users are not organic, right? They saw an ad, we reported a click. We should be last click. You guys should get the credit, but someone else is last click, so this can go up to 50%. Basically, we developed these benchmarks, and we developed a framework to kind of clean this up operationally. This is the same advertiser, not the top grossing six-figure a day spender. This is the before and after. So look at the levels of discrepancies, how different they are before and after they basically decided to clean up their fraud, their UA operations. So this is data that we can obviously provide for you to you guys easily. And today, basically, there's two groups of advertisers in this room. There's the guys that are kind of stuck in this phase. We call it the cannibalizing phase, where these channels become more and bigger and bigger and bigger for you guys. Quality is great. These channels are dying. These channels, by the way, they also include Google, Facebook, all the self-attributing ones. Even though they keep self-attributing and self-reporting based on their numbers, at the end of the day, the common practice is compare what you see in Facebook to what you see on the attribution dashboard, and use that discrepancy as a multiplier on your budget, on your bid, on your campaign goal. So actually, this problem makes Facebook and Google also smaller for you guys. There's the group that is here, and that's where most of you guys are today. That's the good news. Figuring out what is non-incremental, what is incremental, and focusing on these channels. The bad news is that these channels that are still live, they are still doing some things that where they try to over-optimize their attribution strategy. So this is kind of a snapshot of contribution of how it looks today. If we look at our advertiser, everything here is anonymized. If you know your advertiser ID, then they're somewhere here. But basically, last year when we talked about fraud, this list was almost all of it was red. Almost all of it. Today, there's less than 10 red in our top 30. There's a lot of orange ones, which I'm going to talk about later. And this means that the orange part, basically, what it means is that these guys figured out not working with non-incremental channels. They figured out incrementality, but they haven't figured out how do my trusted partners manipulate attribution. That's the part that I'm going to be talking next. So the good news is that most of you are clean, which was not the case. The bad news is that the guys that you paused, they're still coming in. They're still pinging you. They're still after you. And tomorrow they might appear under a different name. And the second part, which is coming up next, is can the incremental channels be trusted? And what does that actually mean? So that's the second phase of the presentation. Any questions so far? Yes. Digital fingerprinting? Sure. So fingerprinting is once attribution happens, basically, once a user opens an app, every time a user opens the app, the attribution SDK reports to their servers saying, hey, Peter just opened this app. If it's the first time Peter is using that app, they're going to need to decide who deserves the credit for driving Peter into the app. If they find a click from Peter's device, that would be device ID matching. That's a deterministic matching saying, hey, we know that this is Peter, it's the same device ID. But if there were no clicks with Peter's device ID, they will fall back to what is called fingerprinting attribution, where they will try to guess if any of those clicks that are coming from, if you have an iPhone X, so we have a click from an hour ago from an iPhone X, from your same IP or from your building or from your neighborhood of your office building. That means that if I have a click fired from my device for Lords Mobile and you download Lords Mobile in a couple of minutes, your organic install is going to be attributed to my click for an ad that I never shown. Fingerprinting is very important to use because you have no choice with iOS limit ad tracking 10. That's a big part of the traffic. So if anyone here is not using fingerprinting, it's a big chunk of traffic of users that are usually savvier because they know how to turn it off. And it's just big. It can really impact your scale. And it's also very important for email marketing, any environment that doesn't have access to your device ID upon a click. So mobile web, email marketing, text marketing, if anyone does that. But that's kind of it. Is that good? Cool. Anything else before we move on to the important part? Cool. So I think one of the most important things that I want you guys to leave with from this session is that it's very easy to manipulate attribution. If I'm an entity, it doesn't matter who it is, if it's from Facebook to an affiliate network to ironSource, it doesn't matter who it is. There's an inherent problem with how incentives work. And in today's world, it's pretty easy to manipulate attribution. This is a real screenshot. This is from one client that basically we're working on cleaning up fraud with them. The real data is anonymized. I added 2 more columns here, which is basically IPM with installs per mil as a metric. So how many users out of 1,000 that watched an ad install the app. And I calculated the eCPM. So basically that multiplied by the bid is your eCPM to see. Understand what's happening here. And I'll explain what each channel is. So this channel is a video network, this channel is a video network. I'm talking about this. These guys basically figured out the first phase. They're not working with non-incremental channels. They're focused on the 8, 10 channels that are still out there that they know are showing ads, that they can trust them, and they're still live with them. But some of these guys are still doing some things that should not be done probably, even though their network, as a network, is very clean. So the chances you will find a fraudulent publisher within that network is very low. Very good products, very high security. The question is, if they're the entity that gets paid and they're the entity that is reporting those click URLs to the attribution platforms, and they're incentivized to optimize that, what are they exactly doing? So this channel is a video network, this is a DSP, a video network. Any guess what kind of channel this one is?
Affiliate.
It looks like an affiliate, right? Just because of the volume of clicks and that there's no impressions, usually. It's a video network. And the behavior is different, though there's one difference. We know that video network is serving ads. I can see them, I have transparency, I can download those games, I can see my ads in that game, but what exactly are they doing? Very simple. Their product is a great product. They decided to build a video product where once the video is over, they automatically redirect the user to the store, which is might be a great strategy. It might be completely fine if it's fine by Google and Apple. But if that was what happening in terms of the flow, so they have the video start, the video completion, and then there's no click. The user just goes to the store. They cannot measure that. They don't know if a user clicked on it. So why are they reporting that as clicks? Look at the volume. The volume is higher than Facebook's impressions, right? So that's great, and you'll understand later how did they become number one on this list. But that's one very simple thing to do. Basically, is to report clicks on the views. If you do know who that network is, usually the case with them is there's the group of people that don't see this. There's the group of people that do figure out and ask them, hey, what is happening here? Can you please stop? Can you change it? The answer usually is, we cannot. That's the product. Some of you in the room have asked them to change it, and they said, okay. So if you did get a no from them, you should probably ask again, but you should never stay with the situation, obviously. If it's a view, it's a view. All they need to do is report views, and then everything's fine. That number should be here. Their product cannot report a click because they don't know if a click happened. Next one in line would be this one. Also a video network. Look at their click-through rates. Probably very, very good creatives running there. This one is also very simple. This is a click that is fired on the completed view. All right, so they do report impressions. That's nice. So you have full funnel measurement, but that should not be the case. That's a simple one. This one is a mixed one. It's a video network and a DSP, and there's one thing that looks very weird here, which is the limit ad tracking rate. And this is not reported on all platforms, but still look at how different it is from the other channels. Does it mean all of it is fraud? No. We know that network. We work with them. We monetize with them. I know the guys, but still, what do I need to do about it? I need to question this. And the teams that figured out what it is, they dove deeper and they realized that some of the stuff that is driven through the programmatic scene is actually the fraudulent type of publishers that drive those numbers up. I think. Yes, next one. This one is a DSP, also very, very high volume of impressions. That's great. So they served 40 million impressions in that time frame, which is 2x Facebook, which is great. But unfortunately, this is a bit skewed, and I apologize for that. But their eCPM is 75 cents. Look at the eCPMs of the rest of the campaigns, and think about the scale. And this campaign is targeting US. You cannot drive 40 million impressions for this CPM. Okay, so this is their eCPM. The DSP take a cut, the exchange take a cut. Basically, those ads are served at a 45, 50 cent CPM. This does not make sense. Basically, with time, what we found in research is that networks try to over-optimize their products in different ways. In this example, for example, was relatively harder to prove deterministically, but the assumption today is that these events were reported on the bid request level. Okay, so they get approached by the exchange. They ask them, hey, do you want to bid on this one? They will report a view, even though a view was not served. If they do win, because they do want to be incremental, they do want to show ads, so let's say they win 2.3% of their requests, the clicks are reported instead of views, right? So basically they skipped one step up. Also nice strategy. The good news is that when you're at that phase, when you work with a short list of channels, the team has much more time to see those things. Even 1 year ago, last year, people were working with 30, 40, 50 channels. A lot of teams, even in this room, today that's not the case. You have time to see this. You need to challenge that data, and it's pretty, screaming from a very high level perspective, and that's pure common sense. Any questions about this? Great question. Yes, it was a great question, and I will repeat it. So, what is your name? Yelena. Yelena asked. Yeah, yeah, you can stand up. Yeah, Elena from Orga. So Elena asked, how can Google, Facebook, Instagram have an LAT rate of more than 0? Because they claim that they only serve ads um, on device ID level. Yes. So what you see here is a standard attribution inherent problem within the attribution, because at the end of the day, the way it works for the attribution platform with those channels is that every install they see, they ask Google and Facebook, hey, did you see that user? Did you have a click from him? They respond with yes, and that's the timestamp. So there is some discrepancies where they misattribute to those channels. I think that's why the numbers are relatively lower than the others. I don't think it will never be airtight. I think that's the reason, but I don't know more than that. But it's a good example of how installs are not necessarily attributed to the right source. So in this case, it would be over-attributing to these channels. Anything else about this? Cool. So one of the things that we wanted to deal with is to kind of create a level playing field as a network. We wanted to be in the same position as other networks in terms of attribution. In some cases, usually it's in the Eastern markets, we met situations where the campaigns went live on our network and they did not perform as well as we thought. And we set with the teams, with the marketing teams, we opened, how much time do I have? Oh, wow. I don't need that. We'll leave time for a lot of questions. Cool. So especially in the Eastern markets, what we saw in terms of competition there is that some of the campaigns that go live on our network do not perform as well as they should be. And when we opened the laptops and logged into the dashboards together with the marketing teams, we saw these kind of things. And when we explained, hey, this is what's happening, that you need to like clean it up, level the playing field to have everyone play with the same rules, the answers they got from the networks usually were like, we cannot change it, we don't know what you're talking about, it's an integration issue, everything's fine, do you like the quality? Those are usually the answers. So we got to a point where we either do the same or we try to prove otherwise, and we ran a test with one of those teams where we were approved to do it, and we ran an A/B test between two different attribution strategy. It's the same campaign, same bid, same targeting. It's a coin flip A/B test. Basically, one flow has legitimate attribution, and the other flow has the attribution where we have a completed view, we report a click. Okay, that's what we tested for a bit over 1 million impressions. The result was pretty crazy. The CPM was 53% higher on that strategy. So if we decide to do that moving forward, our CPMs are going to spike, right? The reason is if we have, think about click-through rates, right? Think about that slide. If the average click-through rate should be, well, I'm putting this one, it's not 12 because of this guy, so let's say it should be 5%. This means that 95% of impressions are just impressions, they're not clicks. And if I report them as clicks, like in this experiment, I actually, for 95% of the users that engage with ad, I actually create a 7-day attribution window instead of 1 day. And that attribution window is actually much stronger than someone that is viewing an ad in 6 days. So if today we report that click, in 6 days from now, someone watches a video ad, decides not to download from that click, searches that, opens the store, downloads, we're going to get the credit, right? So the attribution window is longer and the footprint is significantly stronger. The reason why that network became number one is not only this percentage, it's actually this one. So we, by taking credit for a lot of organics with that experiment, the ARPU of that strategy was also almost 50% higher because we basically took over a lot of organics. This means that for the average marketing team, the next step would be increasing bids. Okay? And that's how basically you make that channel grow, and essentially you reach a stage where that channel becomes very big for you. You're financing this with your own organics. And the quality is great. Like high level, you look at the ARPU, that channel is the best. It's pretty simple, right? But if you don't understand the serving funnel and how attribution really works and differences between the channels, this can easily happen. And today, a big chunk of you guys in the room are in this stage. So some of the channels that you're working with are doing that. And obviously, I hope that by now you understand that you need to make it stop. Any questions about this experiment? Cool. So the common traps and misconceptions. So the incremental parts that I showed, the incremental channels that I showed in the last couple of slides, basically we have many different variations of some guy deciding to over-report events, right? So they can be reporting clicks instead of impressions, completed views, we saw that, reporting views as bid requests and clicks as impressions. There's many others that we saw. We saw people that fired 2 clicks. When a real user clicks on an ad, they fire 2 clicks, one with a device ID, one without. So if that user downloads the app, the first click URL is burned, is associated to that, and the other one stays live for 7 days or until someone downloads organically with the vicinity of that user. Okay, so that's many things that are still happening, and that's only the stuff that I've seen. There's probably many things that we haven't uncovered yet. But it's something that is still a big problem. It's related to kind of viewability and the reliability of attribution. One of the biggest things that we saw is that if you catch them, they will tell you that they cannot change it. And I can confidently say today that that is not true. There's many ways to do that, but for example, that first network that was doing that, you still want them. If you shut down that channel completely because you're pissed, it's not going to be good for your business because your overall installs will go down because they are showing ads. What you need to force them to do and police them to do is just report the view URL instead of the click URL because that's what it is. Okay, that's pretty simple for them to implement, and they've done this for some of the guys in the room. Mixing new type of traffic. This is for the mixed type of channels. So you've probably seen this over last year, but some channels suddenly start to drive different types of traffic without telling you guys necessarily, just letting it happen. You need to monitor that, and it's something that is surfaced easily on the data in terms of quality, in terms of volumes of clicks, impressions, the type of ads that are running there. Something to be aware of, not necessarily shut down, but you need to police it, to be aware of, to analyze accordingly, and react accordingly. For the non-incremental channels, most of you guys are not working with them, but still they're coming in, and the common traps are pretty interesting. So I'm pretty sure that you're getting a lot of free tests, or like, hey, run this free 5, 10, 20K on our network. If it's great, let's keep working. That is very, very dangerous if you do not do the right due diligence. What is the kind of channel? And we're going to provide you later with some sort of questionnaire that helps you decide what kind of channel that is. If that channel is not really incremental, you're going to be financing that free test with your organics. Even though it's free, the other incremental channels are going to go down because they're going to be taking attribution of other channels. So that's a very, very dangerous strategy. If it's a free test and it works, let's just go. If anyone has that strategy within the team, that's very dangerous. Huge discounts. If you spend 100K, 1 million, whatever it is, we're going to get you 10, 20, 30, 50% back rebates. Huge numbers that to the level of do not seem reasonable. The reason for that is that there's no media cost in these examples that I showed, right? Those clicks are fired without an ad being served, and that means that they can really do that. It's very enticing though, right? Integration issues, usually that's what I'm hearing from teams. Yeah, everything is great besides that thing with the click volume, or like the CVR is lower than 0. It's not an integration issue. It's an issue. It's a big issue. Do not let it slide. Even though you trust the guys, and maybe the guys that you work with them, they do not know, maybe internally this is not communicated in the best ways with the companies that they work with. So the relationships can stay great, but you need to make sure that it's good for your business. Another very interesting strategy that we've seen was that, like a non-incremental channel that you were working with in the past, CPI-based, they come in and tell you, listen, let's lower your risk, let's move to a CPA model. You're going to pay us only for users that purchased. You're going to pay us 10% revenue share, 5% revenue share for the users that I drove. That sounds amazing. There's 0 risk there, which is not the case with CPI and the other models. Again, you're going to be financing that with your organic users. Okay? Very, very dangerous. Transparency, you saw the example. There is none. Obviously, always mixing new type of traffic, so you need to keep analyzing this, and it's very hard with these kind of channels because the level of granularity that you have, usually, even if you have 2 levels of sub-site analysis, even that, there might be 25 redirects coming after that. You're not aware, you're treating that as a site, but when you go deeper, you see that there's 6 different types of fraud. Usually, when you're buying one type of fraud, you're buying all of it. There's no like, I only have a click injection problem and my SDK spoofing is fine. There is none. You have all of it. They usually recommend anti-fraud products, which is very interesting. So the fraudulent, or the guys that are non-incremental with the fraudulent traffic, they will recommend you, hey, use this one. Let me introduce this guy. If you have a fraud problem, I've worked with them in the past. And the reason is to build trust, obviously. But at the end of the day, today's anti-fraud products only solve a relatively small part of that problem. It's a big problem to solve. Think about the flow that I showed. It's very hard to understand that the click that came 2 seconds after a real click was fraudulent. It's very hard. There are some solutions that are covering some of these problems better, but even if you turn on 3 products in the same time and you just let things run, everything's going to crash. You're going to see the incrementality problem spike up. And if they recommend you guys, and even if they offer to pay for the product, which means that you're going to be paying for, instead of 100% fraud, you're going to be paying for 60% fraud. So this is a way to lower risk and create trust, but at the end of the day, it still doesn't solve the problem. Any questions so far? Cool. I know it's 6 a.m. in San Francisco, so I hope it's almost time for coffee. Cool. So summarizing the session, and basically think about it, the actions, the things that you guys need to remember from everything that we've seen, is that you need to know your channels. Most of you guys are at this stage today, but you need to focus on the incremental channels only. You need to block yourselves and the team from all the non-incremental channels. You get a lot of emails every day. Find the right way to auto-respond to these guys. Send them a Google form to answer a few questions. But you need to focus on your growth. And by now, you should know where to buy. But if you still have any of the non-incremental channels live, come find me later. We basically have the framework to clean it up, and you'll have it over email later. But that's, I think, why I started with Marketing 101, Marketing Channels 101. You have to measure the full ad serving funnel, from view to post-install, so everything around VTA, click-through rates, click URLs, down to the post-install events. You need to measure that. You need to work with an entity that can provide you all the raw data. So if one day you realize that everything you spent in the last 3 months, which is $15 million, was risky, you need to have the ability to analyze that and go deeper. But so far, everything that I showed was very practical to the operational level. And basically, it means that it's much simpler than that. It's basically understanding high-level incremental or not. Should I focus on this or not, or should I shut it down or not? And then take it to the next step if you want to start getting your money back. The cross-channel impact on incrementality is very important. So the second you turn on a channel that gave you a free test, even if it's free $500,000 of UA, you might be driving your app into the ground, because the incremental channels are going to see much lower eCPMs and will just stop serving ads for your game. That's a big problem, even though you didn't pay that guy nothing, right? So you're financing this with your growth. The guys that stay live, the incremental channels, they have to be policed. So everything that I showed is the thing that we know so far. Maybe tomorrow something will change and will come up. We need to police it, and I think together we need to reach a state of a level playing field for the sake of measurement, and only then credit. Team goals. I think that's in many cases where this problem starts. A lot of the teams are compensated, or their goals are based on either number of acquired users or ROAS. This is a very big problem. So if you're acquiring your organics, that's bad. And if someone is compensated accordingly, that's something that has to change within the team and the company. Same for ROAS. right? So these channels will have higher ROAS. Their ARPU is higher, and you can just drop the bids. You're going to still be getting the same amount of clicks. So if something is broken within your team goals, you have to change it immediately once you land back after all of Nadav's arak. And most teams today are at a stage that is dangerous. Think about profits from the app, paid and organic combined. Think about other strategies, but definitely not paid installs and ROAS. And the state of the anti-fraud tools is not there yet. It's very far from that point. If someone is pitching you very strongly and also offering free tests, that's great. But I think the guys that have more of a realistic approach that on how the problem cannot be solved yet, these guys probably should be trusted more. But today we cannot endorse someone yet, even though we'd love to. We're at a point that I would love to have all of you guys use one solution that solves the problem. But unfortunately, we cannot endorse anyone yet. And we're working closely with all of them. We're sharing all of this with them. All of this has been seen by most of them, the big ones. Some of these guys have some strategies that are products that are more based on their marketing strategy. Some of the products are not there yet, and some of this cannot be solved yet, and some fraud hasn't been seen yet. You saw the traps. Some of them are very simple, though very enticing. It's very hard to say no to a free $1 million test. It's very hard. It's not free. It's not going to be free. And one thing that really simplifies like the incremental and non-incremental channels is if you're not monetizing with that partner, then think twice, because how can you say that you know where ads are really running? They never approached you for monetization. They never talked to you. They don't know anyone that is using them for monetization. So how are they getting all those users? That's like a very, very simplified way to look at the problem. As part of like you guys coming here, which is great, you're going to receive a package where you're going to see this deck. So all of you guys that took photos, you're going to see this better. To those of you who are still buying fraud from non-incremental channels, you're going to get everything that we found about your apps. You're going to get screenshots of rebrokering, you're going to get videos of what I showed specific to your app of how are you paying for an organic user. You're going to get all the click URLs fire that we found. That's just one way to tell you, hey, you guys are buying fraud. Very simple to replicate. It's done in the lab, but it's something that you can also do in your teams. You're going to get a channel verification questionnaire. It's something that we built as part of this process of how the marketing team can distinguish and decide, is this a DSP, is this a network, or is this something that probably I don't want to do right now. And it's also questions that if someone tells you, yes, I can do that, then yes, I can report views, then yes, I can report that, I can do that, I can serve ads, then they're probably also committing to do things that either they can do or can't. You're going to get a fraud elimination framework that I mentioned earlier. If you are part of that group that is still working with non-incremental channels, a framework of how to prove this internally and how to kind of throttle it down and clean it up, and a fraud impact calculator, which is it helps internally, usually with senior management, of like, this is what was happening. Everyone has this problem. This is how the impact it impacted us. And one of the biggest things that is very important to understand from all this presentation is that this is not like how much we spent on these guys. It's not only that. So we spent $10 million with these guys. It was all fraud. It was all the growth that we lost on the incremental channels. That is something very important. Usually people only think about the dollars spent on the fraudulent channels, but actually the real damage can actually be your top grossing ranks. That's it. Any questions?
About the team goals, you don't recommend having ROAS or installs volume. What would you recommend?
The only thing I think of, did everyone hear the question? So the question was if I'm not recommending the team goals to be based on ROAS or number of paid installs. I think the only thing I'm thinking of right now, and that I found that is a good goal for the team would be the profit, basically. So how much this app made minus how much we spent, but for organic and paid users. So everything that kind of this makes a UA manager decide between should I keep buying my organics or not, which we're still seeing, he's going to be compensated to stop fraud, right? So he's basically minimizing the non-incremental channels and investing in incremental channels because that's where the ROS will come from, but that's going to be kind of embedded in the process, right? So if it's ROS or paid user, it's only focused on the users that I'm buying. And everything you've seen here, a lot of it is around organic cannibalization. So you're buying your organics, and the team is compensated to keep buying that. That's a big problem. So the only thing I can think of is like the app profit, the net earnings. If you have other ideas, I'd love to hear. That's the only thing I have. Anything else? Any questions? Yes.
One of the things I've been giving a lot of thought to, and I'd like to see happen, is a change in last click attribution, which causes a lot of this and would change the incentives. Do you ever see that changing?
So I see like a lot. This is a lot that is happening in conferences. Usually, people on stage they talk about multi-touch and things like that. The market is very far from that in really executing that. Not only the attribution platforms, where most of them they only have a click and a view, without even differentiating between a view from a banner and a view from a playable ad, right? So even that is not prioritized. I think that the marketing teams cannot really find time today to implement a change in that strategy. Most of the tools don't even support MTA. I think the change should come from the attribution platforms, where they need to take a step back and increase their granularity level. So if I reported a view from a banner 2 hours after a view from a playable, that playable probably is stronger. If that click is coming from a banner or click is coming from a playable, even though the banner is later, the playable 10 minutes later, that probably drove the ad. Or as a marketing team, I want to attribute the install to the source that I'm giving them the biggest credit. So today, basically what is happening, especially what I've seen, it's last touch anything. This is clicks and views that are reported as clicks, and even not views are reported as clicks. So it's last, anyone that comes into the door last wins. So it's so far from that, and I think the change first step is within the marketing teams to clean up this mess on your tables. Click volumes will go down. The attribution platforms need to facilitate that conversation. It's happening with some of them. They are talking about it, but it needs to also come from you guys to push them to say, I want to give less credit to a banner than a interstitial or a playable ad, and prioritize that. So I've been in some workshops with attribution platforms on that, but it's their prioritization is based on their clients' needs, and that's you guys. So keep pushing that.
Thanks, Yev.
Always.